In today's video, we take a look at tonight's election results in the 2023 general election. Now, on your screen right now are the 6 most contentious races and crucial races in this cycle. 5 of them I made predictions on. The link to that video will be on the top of your screen right now. But without further ado, let's get right into today's video. Now, let's start off by Ohio's issue 1, the right to an abortion. Now, this was typically a ballot initiative isn't very contentious, right? But this one was especially competitive because this essentially signified how a leaning red state would view on an issue like abortion. We know that Ohio voted for Trump in 2016 and 2020 by 8 percentage points respectively. So if this issue failed, that means that states that are leaning towards the Republicans are actually against the issue of abortion, which would mean Republicans would likely shift their focus on a much more anti-abortion scale. However, in the state of Ohio, this issue passed overwhelmingly by a 13-point margin. Now, I did not make a specific numerical prediction. I just said that I expected the vote to pass by a wide margin. Well, it clearly has. Now, in many of the traditionally conservative counties around Columbus, Clark County, Butler County, and some of the traditionally blue but currently trending red counties such as Stark County, Mahoning County, Trumbull County. These are counties that are traditionally blue counties that have shifted Republican or reverted back into the more Democratic-leaning option, which is to allow the state to put abortion as a right into the state's constitution. This was not much of a surprise. We all knew this was going to happen. Now, going to the next race here, Ohio's issue 2, legalizing marijuana. Now, this was also not much of a surprise. The issue passed by a sweeping 14% margin. Democrats typically rooted for the yes option, while Republicans rooted for the no option. This race passed by a similar margin as Ohio's issue 1. Again, this would be checking the attitude towards a more moderate / swing state to a kind of leaning Republican state, how those voters would react to a issue like this. Now, I also said that this issue will probably pass by a sweeping margin. It has passed by 14 points. This is not much of a surprise either. It's interesting though, but this one slightly less polarizing. We see that the color shade isn't as significant. No county actually had more than 70% yes votes or more than 70% no votes. So that's something to keep in mind, but the margin is remarkably similar. Now we get into some of the most contentious races. Let's start off with Kentucky governor. This was one of the most contentious races, if not the single most contentious race. I had said that I believed Andy Beshear would win by around 2 percentage points, by a vote of 50% to 48% against Daniel Cameron. Now it's pretty much spot on for Daniel Cameron, but I underestimated Andy Beshear, and here's why. We see that he performed relatively similar to his 2019 performance, but his performance was slightly better across the board. So, first off, the 2 largest Democratic-leaning counties in the state, Jefferson County. This is where Democrats get the majority of their votes. The largest vote packet for Democrats are in Jefferson County. This is essentially, while vote packet isn't a very descriptive term, but this is essentially where Democrats get the most amount of votes. Andy Beshear won 70% of the vote in this county. Fayette County, Andy Beshear won 72% of the votes in that county. These counties typically vote for Democrats, but Democrats typically hold under 60% of the vote. You see that Andy Beshear did very well in the urban counties. Now let's look at some of the suburban counties around Lexington. These are typically counties that Trump won in 2020 by around 20 points. Andy Beshear won some of them by close to 20 points. Again, an overperformance by Andy Beshear. But the most interesting thing is that he narrowed down a lot of these rural counties. These rural counties typically preferred Trump by about an 80 to 20 margin in the 2020 presidential election. Daniel Cameron failed to crack 70% in most of these counties. Now, I know that some of these counties, they look like, wow, 6,000 votes, 3,000 votes, 11,000, 12,000 votes. The vote totals in some of these counties aren't so significant, but things add up, right? The rural leaning districts, some of them actually voted for Democrats. There's a district over here that Andy Barr, the Republican incumbent there, won by 9 in 2020. That district voted for Andy Beshear by around 15 to 20 points. So these were very impressive performances by Andy Beshear. nonetheless, this was expected. Uh, Forecasts consistently showed that Andy Bashir was probably going to win, and he indeed did. Now, the more surprising election, though, was Mississippi governor. At least in my opinion, I had Tate Reeves winning by slightly under 10, but he won by less than 5. Now, put that into context. Kentucky Governor Andy Bashir won re-election by 5.0 points. Tate Reeves won re-election by 4.9 points. Essentially, a Democrat in Kentucky did better than a Republican in Mississippi, which is quite crazy to think about. In fact, Andy Bashir won by a margin of 67,000 votes. Tate Reeves won by just around half of that, 40,000 votes. So it's quite crazy to think about it. He underperformed his last performance against a Democrat who was arguably more well-liked, Mike Espy. And that shows a lot. Again, Tate Reeves was expected to win. Some predictions actually had this as a safe race. As it turns out, Tate Reeves only won by a 5% margin. This was less than the vast majority of pundits expected. Now, polling had consistently suggested that this was a close race, at least closer than what people initially expected. Now, I didn't really believe that. I thought that Mississippi, being a very red state in an environment where Democrats, really Joe Biden's overall popularity was quite low, I thought that was pretty much the end for Democrats. Democrats were not going to win a state like Mississippi, and obviously they did lose, but they did a lot better than what we expected. Jackson County, for instance, Biden won with around 70% of the vote there. Ben Presley got 79%. That was a very impressive performance. Now, earlier on in the night, Ben Presley actually held at the peak 87% of the vote here. And I saw that in my comments, people were like, well, Ben Presley could actually pull this one off if that holds. Now, that did not hold, but nonetheless, he did very well for a Democrat in a state like Mississippi. Although Tate Reeves was unpopular, people just didn't see this result coming. Now going to Virginia legislature, another win for Democrats. Before the election, the House of Delegates were favoring the Republicans by just around 2 votes, but the state Senate was held on to Democrats by a margin of 21-19. Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin, who will not be able to seek re-election in 2025, hoped to flip the state Senate and hold the state delegates so that he could have control and pass the legislation, which includes a 15-week abortion ban. Nonetheless, he failed. He not only did not flip the state Senate as he hoped for, in fact, Democrats, although they are in the 2 races that are currently contended, both our Republicans are leading in both. Democrats have already held as many seats as they had before, and Democrats gained what I believe to be 3 seats in House of Delegates. Essentially, Democrats are overperforming their previous 2021 performances. Now, early voting signs had suggested that Republicans were actually overperforming their 2021 totals, but as it turns out, that was not very accurate. Democrats actually overperformed. Again, a disappointment for Republicans who were actually thinking to flip the state Senate, but instead, not only did not flip the state Senate, actually also lost the House of Delegates. Now, Glenn Youngkin truly cannot do anything. Now, the final race we're going to be talking about is the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Now, this one is the one I did not make a prediction on. I'd also pretty much ignored this race. But again, the results are not that promising for Republicans. Daniel McCaffrey, the Democrat, won by 6 points, 5.8 points to be exact, over Republican Caroline Casillo. Now, turnout is obviously quite low compared to a presidential election, but nonetheless, this is a warning sign for Republicans. Republicans were hoping to end up winning this race because that would suggest that they're in a strong spot for 2024. That is pretty obvious, right? Right now, Biden's popularity rating is not great. He is polling behind in the state of Pennsylvania, for instance, according to the New York Times, a liberal leading source. Biden is actually underwater against Trump by about 5 percentage points. So you naturally expect a Republican to perform relatively well here. Well, as it turns out, Democrats won by 5.8 percentage points. Now, one of the key things here is that Democrats did not necessarily win some of the competitive counties. For example, Democrats failed in Erie County. This is a county that Joe Biden won. The Democrat here did not. But Democrats were able to do very well in the New England border here. You see that Democrats ran up the margins. For example, Northampton County. This is a county that Biden won by less than a point. This is a county that the Democrat here won by 14 points. Democrats also ran up the margin in Allegheny, where Pittsburgh is located. Biden did not crack 60% of the vote here. The Democrat here won with 63% of the votes. We see that Democratic turnout was comparatively higher than Republican turnout, and Republicans really suffered pretty much lower vote totals in some of the rural regions. This is a warning sign for the Republicans. I think Republicans coming in here in 2023 expected a relatively good performance. Biden's approval rating, as I mentioned, not very great. The polling suggests that right now voters prefer Trump over Biden in many swing states. However, tonight's performance is a disappointment for the Republicans, and it is to serve as a warning sign for the Republican Party that they're not as strong of a spot as they may believe them to be. Anyways, thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.